Good morning, everyone, and welcome to October 21st, Coffee with Colleen. And not any real particular agenda today other than to talk about the grants that we have that we're in the middle of processing, and then also to talk a bit about broadband. And I wanted to make sure everybody saw the link that was from a recent Seattle Times article that gives a really good overview of the unemployment insurance taxes that employers pay and what the status of that is. So I thought they did a very good job of recapping it. So anyway, I'm glad I've got some of our partners in crime here with us. I see Amy and Rick and Mike, and of course Randy Johnson, Commissioner from the county that's provided funding to the EDC to work on these grants. And so we've been contracted by them to provide the grants and evaluate them. Again, there are so many grants out right now. And so I want to make sure businesses are fully aware of those grants. And it's, and the reason why there's so much available right now compared to prior months is that the state received over $3 billion worth of funding, and they were thinking, the governor's office was thinking that Congress would change its mind and allow the state to retain part of those funds for revenue shortfalls. As it turns out, that has not and did not occur. So the funds have to be spent based on what the CARES Act requirements set. So they've now they're distributing all of the money, and so there's huge opportunities from all sorts of agencies. And we have, so I see Amy, if you're on, if you would put the link to our website where we have grant information up there, and make sure you either access the link through an incognito if you go on, so that, or get rid of the cookies out of your cache, so that you get the most recent version of the grant page. Still letting some folks in. We have had our grant selection committee meetings, have had multiple meetings, and they have reviewed the grant applications that were provided for the Working Washington 2 and for the CDBG grants. And the businesses have been selected for those preliminarily. Our staff is now going through and ensuring those who have been selected do have their L&I account up to date, they haven't been debarred from the federal government contracting process, and that they do have fewer than 20 employees for the Working Washington 2 grant and fewer than 5 for the CDBG grant. So we are, as soon as we have confirmed that, then we will notify those that have received the Working Washington 2 grants. But we're right, this Sunday is the deadline for the Lifeboat 2 grant. The Working Washington 2 was going to only for-profit businesses and to chambers of commerce in Clallam County. All of this actually is in Clallam County. And there's and then $645,000 is available for the Lifeboat 2 grants, and that deadline to apply is this Sunday at midnight. And I think it is a pretty easy application. And we are trying to, that's also available for nonprofits. And the intention so far from the grant committee is to, well, of course, to give funding, and we're considering if a business has already received grant funds from a local source of CARES Act funding, but then also based on employees and based on the type of business and how hard that type of business was hit by the pandemic. So we are not going to be confirming invoices or anything like that. It'll be much more straightforward. We just are requiring that businesses certify that they did not receive funds previously for what they would use this grant money for. And they have to certify some other things. They do that through the application, but then they'll do it again through the contract. So in the next few days, I'll start today notifying those businesses. 19 businesses that received $4,000 from the, will receive $4,000 from the community development block grants for micro enterprises. And then there are, I thought we were only going to do $10,000 awards, but some of the grant selection committees for their area wanted to do $5,000, so they gave more out. But again, those same businesses could receive more funding during the Lifeboat process. So let them know in the next few days, and then we'll do the grant selection committee reviews next week as well for the Lifeboat, and we'll keep on informing about the Lifeboat 2 grant winners. But so does anybody have any questions? And
yeah, you've got a new grant. It looks like the NDC Small Business Resiliency Grant. When did that come up?
That came up, so that is funding that went right from the state. It was an example of, they realized there was additional funding available, and so it went directly to the NDCs. They're primarily, found out later, they're trying to push that money out to businesses owned by people of color or in communities that are not, haven't been served. And so I think maybe we can make that claim. So I certainly don't think it'll hurt to apply. I believe it is a reimbursement-based grant. But they're primarily trying to target minority-owned businesses with that grant.
Okay.
Now, Colleen, on the Lifeboat 2 grant application, one of the things that I didn't see on there, and I'm hoping I didn't miss it, is it didn't ask specifically if you received funding from the Lifeboat 1.
So I know who received funding from the Lifeboat 1, so I've got that list, and I've found frequently that the applicants, when they say whether they received funding, they're not getting it right, because either because of timing when they applied, or because of, they just got confused what kind of grant was that they received funding for. So I'm not very worried about it. I know who received the funding, so we're going to be comparing the lists and putting it into the spreadsheets that way for the grant selection committee.
Okay, great. Yeah. And do you know how many applications have been submitted so far?
I can tell you in just a moment. Or Amy or Peggy, if you guys are on, can you take a look? I'm checking it out right now, actually.
Okay.
Okay. We have received for the Lifeboat 2, 246 applications as of right now.
And if you applied for that other one, you're automatically in this, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And we had, through that process, we had 193, but I've noticed that some people have applied twice.
And do you know how many awards you're planning on giving? How many grants?
The range is going to be between 2,000 and 20,000. And the general consensus from the grant selection committee and the input that we got from the county commissioners was that if it was a home-based business, one owner, no additional employees, the amount would probably be 2,000. If it is a larger business with expensive inventory or high rent, lots of employees, you know, we wanted to be able to reach $20,000. So anyway, it's a range, and we are trying to distribute the funds across the county in an equitable manner. So we are looking at, since the city of Sequim had their Sequim Business Relief Fund that was $250,000, and the county is providing to 2 different businesses a separate amount. You know, we've put a little bit more emphasis on the West End because they haven't had any direct grants for their areas. So and it's not divided by district because people don't identify which district they live in of the county. If they're a Port Angeles address, they're in both District 2 and 3. So we use census data on different areas, and like Joyce is actually considered in Port Angeles. So the outside of Joyce, so Beaver and Forks, Nia Bay, La Push, Clallam Bay, CQ, all those addresses, they make up about 13.5, 14% of the population of our county, but we're going to give them over 15% of the funds from the Lifeboat to pot of funding. And that's something, again, that the grant selection committee talked about and supported. So I see there are 4 comments in the chat. One, Amy put the link to the Choose Clallam First for the grants there. And please, again, keep up with that. There's going to be more funding coming through different avenues. There's one actually that just came out. Well, I heard about it just yesterday or Monday, I think. And that's $50 million coming from the Department of Fish and Wildlife for commercial fishermen and aquaculture businesses. Anything directly related to fishing. And so that's $50 million for Washington State fishermen and aquaculture businesses. So if you know of any businesses in that category, they are probably going to get a lot of funding, because that's a lot of money for a fairly small sector of businesses. But the state hasn't even announced what the criteria are for that grant. So we are waiting. Oregon received funding, as did California and Alaska, and a lot of those states have already closed their grants, whereas our state hasn't even opened it yet. So it's going to be very quick for that application process. And as soon as I hear about it, I'll put it on that, I'll put it on the website there.
And do you anticipate that's going to be available for tribal fisheries too?
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. So let's see. Lori says, my understanding is the Washington, or I think you mean Working Washington 2 grant application will be used for Lifeboat 2. If we applied for Working Washington 2, then we've also applied for Lifeboat 2. Is that correct? Yes, that is correct. And, oh, and Amy had already answered. Okay. So are there any other questions about the grant process? And I'll be informing everyone this week whether or not they did or did not receive the Working Washington 2 grant. And again, that is not a reimbursement based grant. And there are funds going to each of the 4 chambers, actually. Column Bay CQ also has a chamber, so they're going to be receiving funds through that. Let's see, Randy Johnson, Commissioner Johnson, do you have anything you want to add?
Sorry, Colleen. Oh, there we go. Sorry, no, I just wanted to say thank you so much again. The committees across the county that are putting this together. You've been very particular, as we all know, that the state, all the good things may come to an end someday, and B, then the auditors are going to come in later. And I certainly appreciate the methodology you guys are using, the EDC working with the chambers and individuals from each one of the areas to allocate the funding. I'll stand up to, I've had 4 or 5 comments which are all negative. Oh, how can you do that? What are you doing? And I am just so pleased, and I certainly stand right behind you for everything you've done. I'm just so appreciative. So, and again, we need to get the money out, and it's obviously going for a worthwhile cause. And I certainly don't want to have it end up going back to the state. I would tell you that. I'd rather have it go to businesses here in the county. Thank you.
Yes. So Randy, if anybody has any concerns about it, have them contact me and I'll be happy to share with them the process and put them at ease. And if they have any recommendations for me, I'd love to hear about it.
You'll never get these people to be at ease, sir. They just would rather yell at a commissioner.
Okay, got it. Okay. And I want to also have, if there aren't any more questions or comments about the grants, I will go ahead and I'll share highlight some information about the broadband action meetings that are going to be occurring across the county. There's 3 of them, and I put that in the email that I sent out to people yesterday. The one is being held all 3 are over Zoom, but they have phone numbers also that you can call into. So if you know some people that particularly don't have good access, please let them know about that, or let me know and I'll make sure that they receive the invitation. And John, do you want to talk about the purpose of these broadband meetings from the CURB grant funding and the process the consultant is going through?
Sure, I can chime in on that. So the port was able to obtain a $50,000 grant from the state to do a baseline analysis of what services are and aren't available in our community, which is not nearly as simple as it seems. There's a lot of components here, a lot of different players. You have public utility districts that are involved. You have private enterprise like CenturyLink that's involved, and even getting all of them to share their data has been a challenge. So quite a bit of effort has gone into kind of laying out the ground map of what's going on. And so a lot of that data has been collected. And so the next step in this process is for the consultant to hold some public meetings to gather public input on what is desired for the next step. How do we move forward towards building a bigger, robust internet system across our entire Olympic Peninsula? I think the elephant in the room that no one really knows how to deal with here is Starlink. Recently, the Ho tribe came out with just an incredible success story where, you know, they're out in the middle of nowhere from a infrastructure perspective. They don't have any fiber going out to them. And they were getting, using low orbit satellites, they were getting service as good, if not better, than most of us get in our own homes right now. And so I watched a news story yesterday. Starlink launched another 60 satellites yesterday or the day before. And so SpaceX, headed up by Elon Musk, is moving forward very rapidly. And so I'm looking forward to hearing what the consultants have to say, because I don't know how we mix in the the old school concept of how do we get fiber from one place to another versus when do we give up on fiber and realize there are alternative ways of providing that. So right now, they're just trying to build the roadmap of how do we get broadband across the peninsula. And next step with these three public meetings is gathering some public input, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Great, thanks, John. Last week, EDC Team Jefferson put together a meeting with Melvin John Ashew, who's the vice chair of the Hoh tribe and who's the one that tweeted, how broadband was like trying to make it up a river with a spoon previously, and now they've entered into the 21st century. And so, of course, the Hoh tribe is located in Jefferson County, but they're very close to Forks. And he talked about the process and the results. The information that we're hearing so far and that Melvin John shared was that if there was a house that had tree cover, a lot of tree cover, they got 35 megabytes per second download speed, but homes that did not have any had 110 or so around that area. And different people that are in the industry have said they're going to charge about $80 per month for that, which, is the equivalent to $1,000 a year. And some people in our county, that's in Jefferson County, is not affordable. So again, I'm hoping to be able to announce shortly that Russ Elliott for the state's broadband office will be able to join us because, there are a lot of kids that are in different school districts that cannot, it's not right. I think everybody recognizes that they would have to drive into the JCPenney's parking lot to get to a hotspot to be able to connect to the internet to do their homework. With online classes similar to these, it's really not practical to have several kids and a mom sitting in the car of JCPenney's or wherever it is to try to access the Zoom meeting. So hopefully it seems as though that would be a really strong option for meaning Starlink as a solution, and then potentially subsidizing that service. And from, I can put some links to different articles that have been published lately in like GeekWire and PC Magazine, where the expectation is that in 4 months from the beginning of October, so by the beginning of February or so, they think that Starlink will be able to start delivering these satellite dishes. And they're, according to Melvin, they were very simple to operate. He said that, you can put them in the yard if you want, but you can't run over the cable. You attach it to the house somewhere, and it takes about a minute or so to find itself, and then it's set. And it was, it was very straightforward to connecting it to your Wi-Fi in your house. And it, serves as the Wi-Fi source. And so, really by the beginning of February, they're going to start rolling out, and that's for northern United States and Canada. And we also asked, well, if we're pretty close to the Hoh tribe, would we be first in line, or, but the way he described it was there was a flashlight that was a 3-mile diameter that was able to focus the broadband capacity over the tribe's reservation area. So even though Melvin John lives in Forks, and which is pretty close, he couldn't put up the satellite at his home in Forks and be able to receive access. It had to be within that spotlighted area. So again, they're anticipating a 4-month period for it to be able to find itself, or ensure that they've those satellites that they've launched have been able to reach their target locations of orbit to be able to serve the broadband needs of northern United States. And so we're looking at the beginning of February probably. So, you know, I think that's good news. We'll see if that really does occur, but that's the best information that we've received so far.
What's the cost of the Starlink? Do you know?
$80 a month is what.
What's at the high end? Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
And
for
then-
110 megabytes, you know, I'm paying more than that right now for CenturyLink, and on a good day I get 35, and on a bad day I get, you know, 6. So I'm excited about it. And if you haven't already connected with them for their pilot program, that if somebody can put that in the chat box, there's just Starlink, and you can then put your email address in and you can be notified as soon as they start rolling it out. That's been open for, gosh, since the beginning of the year at least. And so, you know, you can certainly eventually get their service, but it sounded like it might be first come, first served, depending on, you know, when you applied for it. So does anybody else have any more information on broadband that they know about or want to share? I could have Melvin John possibly on a coffee with Colleen, and he could share with you directly his experience. It was pretty cool. But you know, that just in a matter of minutes, they were able to go from 2 megabytes per second. And he shared that at the Ho tribe, that if there was a Microsoft update, that their operations had to shut down for 2 days to be able to do that update. And so now it just takes, you know, a matter of minutes, like it would if you had high-speed internet. So it's been a real game changer for their tribe and their community. They received 30 satellites at the Ho tribe, and 24 of them went to residences because they have 24 homes there, and the other 6 went to their administrative buildings. And so now, you know, they're just zooming with great speed at their admin buildings. And kids, some of the parents aren't very happy because now their kids are wanting to play all sorts of internet games, and they were playing outside. But, so I see we have Cindy, and we did have Jim on as well. Do you guys want to share what's happening with your school districts, and as far as internet connectivity and laptops and the like, what kind of challenges you guys are facing, or is it going quite well at this point? Cindy or Jim?
So I'll go first. So it's going pretty well. We took some of our CARES money and bought Chromebooks for our students. You probably know that we have our kindergartners back in the building. That's only about 7 or 8 kids per classroom though. And then we this week started the 1st and 2nd graders back.
Maybe you should just put them outside.
So we of course we wanted to watch with the kindergartners how that went, and it went really well. They did really great with face mask. Everything's going great. All the interaction I've had with parents, they're really thrilled about it. You know, a lot of parents want their kids all back in school. The conductivity issue is still kind of a challenge, but it's getting better. We were really fortunate that the Lower Elwha stepped up with us and did a learning center down at the tribe before we open the schools, and so some of the students could go down there. But it is a challenge. And last spring we were having kids go to the Lower Elwha and sit on the bus, or go to the Direct Creek School and sit on the bus. So anyway, but it's kind of a challenge across the whole state. So I meet with the compact schools, which are 7 school districts that are run by the tribes, every other week, and this seems to be a continued conversation. So it'll be great to share that information with the compact superintendents. But things are going well. Of course, if our county continues to be good, we'll continue to put more students back in school.
Right. Thank you,
Colleen,
Cindy.
I heard my name earlier. I was in that other meeting also. So on the front page of Sequim Gazette, it has Sequim School District's plan for today. But we are, in one sense, quickening the opening based upon the data that we get from the county health office, and we're following that very, very closely. But we have a what's called a AABB model, which is a Monday, Tuesday, and then the other half on Thursday, Friday, with Wednesday being the personal development learning day for teachers. We also just received a $20,000 grant for homeless students, which we'll be using in the McKinney-Vento program, providing some connectivity, laptops type thing. And then Sequim Education Foundation we should be getting a 5,000 or 500
Jim, we can't hear you.
Sorry, let me try something. Is that better?
Yeah, I still can't hear you, Jim.
Connectivity
There we
is
go. Okay.
all right. So we're also engaged with that broadband task force that you mentioned, Russ, on the state level. So all those ABC groups of WASDA, WASA, WASBO, WEA, we're all, and that includes DNR. DNR owns some, well, actually, schools own the property, but there are towers on those property, and leasing those properties continue to provide revenue to schools. So we'd like to keep that revenue coming. And it's in 2 different pots: the common school trust lands, and then the state forest trust lands. So I said Monday night at our meeting, this is truly a walk hand in hand with our community, and we're pleased with how the community, but we still have folks out there that I'm just going to say right here, I want to make it a political thing, and mask, no mask, but we need people to follow those and follow the social distancing, because if we are truly going to get all of our kids back in, we need the community to be following that also. And, because we're looking at those kids' safeties, the family safeties, our staff. And now we're not doing testing at the buildings, but we have a program where families have to sign in and do a wellness check before they put Timmy and Cindy on the bus. And that says if they have a temperature or so forth. But it's just like before COVID, you're getting your family together to go to school, and you're like, no, just go to school. You don't have a tummy ache, go to school. Well, then we at the schools then have to figure that out. And we're going to take their temperature when they get off the bus. And just like before COVID, we're going to send them to the nurse's office and then call the parents back up, and you need to come and pick up Timmy and Cindy, Susie. And then we face that okay, what is this? Is this just the sniffles, or is it COVID, and what that all means? And that's the complexity and the seriousness of this. And so I just hope there's listening ears here on this that are compassionate and understanding of that. And I thank the county for their work. Commissioner Johnson, thank you very much. And our partners and all this. So that's what I have from Swim Schools. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. So I saw two good questions and one point in the chat. One, Patty, someone did ask Melvin John about any interference, and he said that there was none, and that anyone had experienced to that point. Granted, they started, I think, in the end of September, so it had been less than a month, but they had not experienced any interference. And they said that when the next group of satellites is established, that they expected there would be some downtime, but they would be told well beforehand when that would be, and it was supposed to be in the middle of the night, but that they had not experienced any interference to that point. And then also, there was a really good point made by, I think it was Lewis. Yes, there's a link there that's a speed test, that part of the process to show where there is internet and where there's not, through the investigation that the North Olympic Development Council has been hired to handle on behalf of the Port of Port Angeles for this countywide study. Having that information about where there is good internet and where there's not is really important. And because some of these grants focus on unserved communities, and that means a household or an area that has less than 25 megabits per second down or less than 3 up, which, at my house, I never get 3 up. And then there's the latency rate and something, a jitter factor or something. I don't know. I was just a computer engineer in school. I don't know anything about it. That was too many decades ago. We didn't have any of this stuff. I don't think, we didn't have internet when I was in school. So that's my excuse. And I'm sure that's something Patty could explain to all of us, or many of you could, in a much more professional and thorough manner than I can. Let's see, with that, are there any other questions you guys have? I see it's only 8:39, and I'm happy to talk about grants further. If any of you guys want to stay on the line, if you have a specific question about your own business or a particular business and you don't want to ask in front of the whole group, I'll be happy to stay on the line and answer your question for you.
I've got a question. I mean, your group's talking to businesses all the time. What kind of feedback are you getting from people, how things are going right now?
It's really the hit or miss. Some are hammered hard, and others are like, no, it's going fine. We're doing just fine. Some reduction. I'd love to pass that to Lena too. She works with a bunch of businesses and Rick and Mike, of course, as well. What are you seeing, Lena? And then Mike, if you'll answer it, and then Rick and Micah.
So I would say generally overall, my businesses are experiencing lower revenues than what they have had in the past. They're doing okay. Some businesses have been very busy, but what I'm worried about is my seasonal people and going into the season, because usually they're generating cash to get them through the slower season that comes, as we get into fall and winter. So I'm really concerned about, right now there's a lot of funding available, although I think it's going to be spread pretty thin, relatively speaking. And then once all of that funding is exhausted by the end of this year or end of November, going into January and February are really concerning for me, for my clients.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks, Lena. Mike?
Yeah, I've had a mix. A lot of my seasonal businesses that are a little bit bigger businesses have said that they kind of seen their season shift by about 2 months, and I think they're going to be okay because of that. Towards the end of summer, tourism really sort of picked up, and if it carries kind of through October here, they'll be all right. But I have quite a bit of mix on otherwise.
Rick?
I don't think I have a lot else to add. It's a very similar kind of, a lot of the businesses are, we're at 75%, which is enough to kind of keep us going. We're a little nervous about what the winter's going to look like and how long this is going to last. And then there are some that are just in absolute dire straits.
Mm-hmm.
But those are certainly, I would say, the minority of folks.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And I think a lot of business owners have, especially seasoned business owners, know to make adjustments with their staffing levels, make financial adjustments that they've had to do. But these are definitely unprecedented times, and nobody knows what the future is going to hold.
Mm-hmm.
What I will say is the folks that are really struggling are anybody that started a business within the last year or the last 6 months prior to COVID, because everybody wants to have, what was your revenue history? What was this? What was that? And they don't have one. And they're at that place where they're supposed to be losing money. They're just starting their business.
Yeah.
But it's even worse. So those, and what, of course, that's my thing, is helping people start new businesses. So I'll beat this drum to death. But, those are the next generation of businesses. And if those are getting wiped out by COVID, we don't have that generation of businesses coming up. So that's my big concern.
Yeah. Thanks, Rick. Yeah. So because of the immense wisdom of our county commissioners, the startup businesses, you like that? The startup businesses will be eligible for Lifeboat 2. So because it's based on what type of business are they, and were they impacted, that kind of thing. So if they were a non-essential retail shop or a restaurant, and they can show that, hey, we don't have comparative revenues from a prior year, but here's if they even wrote a sentence about, here's our expenses, here's our revenues, this is what we're making, our net, and it's not a livable wage, we can ensure that I believe that that's enough evidence to show that they should be receiving some funding from the grant program. And especially if it's an amount that could get them through potentially till the season reopens, if they are a seasonal business. But so Rick, I think those folks should be applying. But we are also going to be considering things like, if they're a commercial fishing business, and if that commercial fishing grant of $50 million is, and we have information about that, we'll be pushing those people to that grant program, especially if they can get 50,000 or something from that grant program. And then also I wanted to highlight that there is through the Seattle Foundation, which we have on our grants page, a child care grant program for nonprofits and tribes. So I'm going to be contacting, and it can be up to $250,000, which is more than the state child care grant. And so we're going to try to I think, apply for that as well. We're trying to have a child care coordinator that we've been working with YMCA, Shore Aquatic Center, Concerned Citizens in Forks that offer child care, to have a person that, and Prevention Works, someone that will work on a countywide child care program. And so, and I've been told by the state to expect that we will be awarded funding at the EDC for that. But then, you know, if we could do a program where it's also funded by the, through this Seattle Foundation grant, that could really kickstart some solutions there as well. So, but it has to be applied for by a 501c3, and we are a C4. So we can't be the lead applicant, but coalitions can get quite a bit of money through that grant program. All righty. I don't see any. Larry Burtness, do you have anything you wanted to add? Thanks for joining us.
Well, I work for the Quileute tribe, of course, in La Push.
Yes.
We have a number of different things going on in La Push that are related to some of the things we talked about here this morning. For broadband communications issues, we've been working with CenturyLink for some time now to get a fiber optic line built out to La Push. It's being supported by the Coast Guard and the tribe and the state of Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission for funding. Right now, the last pieces of it, we're waiting probably another week or 10 days, we hope, for the final easement from the BIA under the CFR 25 Part 164 regulations. The BIA has to approve the easements across tribal lands for these utilities. So we're waiting on those finalized documents, and once that's in place, then that fiber optic build will be in place. We're happy that that's going to happen. And looking at the Starlink opportunities, we're glad that the whole river has got that in place. I used to work for them, and it's nice to see that's happening. But we're expecting that we'll be able to see gigabit plus services at the tribal offices when the fiber is finally installed, and it'll help us dramatically. We do have a fairly good broadband service in right now through existing services through StarTouch and Verizon in the 25 to 30 megabits per performance ranges, and the school is pretty well supported, but individual houses are not, and that's a big problem. Our business administration things are okay. So we've been making progress with that for many years, and hopefully we'll see some great move forward on that. The school construction project is going very well. It's ahead of schedule by a couple of weeks. They've got the foundation pretty well poured, starting to build stem walls now, and a lot of work and planning on municipal infrastructure to expand our water system capacity for the development there and the fire support. And so a lot of things going on there that are positive. We've received a number of grants for support related to COVID and the COVID impacts. There were, of course, tribal set-asides that came from Treasury for that, and the tribe has received those funds and has been able to move forward. The reservation is still closed for outside visitors, and right now will remain so until the first week in November. I expect the council will probably extend that order again when that time comes. Of course, I'm working from my home in Clallam Bay, so that pretty much has kept me out of the village. So not in direct contact with everybody on a regular and daily basis, except by phone and conference meetings. But you mentioned the Seattle Foundation grant. We have examined that and taken a look at that. They do have a special tribal portion for that. It has different limitations. It's somewhere between $25,000 and $100,000, and very generalized in terms of what they allow that grant to be applied for. Childcare is a part of that, but they also include a lot of other general social support systems. So we're examining that to see its viability. And we did just receive another grant that was a press release should be actually published in the paper this week about it, with a $50,000 roughly grant from the National Park Service for their heritage preservation program, a competitive nationwide program. They gave 11 grants, I think, this year, and we were able to get one of those grants for planning of cultural preservation projects and feasibility study and planning for opening a cultural center. So,
terrific. That's great. So Larry, I know that the PUD was proposing, they applied for a public works board, I think it was 4.1 million, is that right, Patty? Grant to try to get fiber from Forks to La Push to the substation there, the middle mile. Is that something that's connected to the Quileutes broadband program to improve broadband to the Quileute Nation?
Well, I had a conversation with the PUD just 2 days ago about that, and they, of course, they don't provide retail service access as a retail provider. They provide broadband capacity to ISPs and others who purchase the data services wholesale and then resell it to the end customers. So I'm hopeful that once they get things like that built out to support the West End a little bit better, that it'll make things a little bit more competitive with what are near monopoly situations right now that CenturyLink has. There are few sources of wholesale broadband services for ISPs to gain access to the data and services required to compete in that market. And so I'm hopeful that will be the case, and we can get a little bit better, or have a few more options for how broadband can be accessed. It's been something that's been ongoing and worked on for many years, at least 20, and we're finally seeing some traction on some of the ideas and things that have been discussed out here for a long time.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for adding that. Appreciate it. So let's see, it's 8:54. Does anybody have any announcements they want to share? Okay, if not, I think we can call it a morning, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. I'm going to stay on, so if anybody has any individual questions about the grants, I'll be happy to answer those. Okay, thanks everyone, and I'm going to turn off recording. Bye.